battery, that's more money right there than I'm willing to break in one shot. I'd much rather go and break something a little bit less important than my camcorder. But if you're going around and you're peeking into people's bedrooms and peeking into their security cameras and their baby monitors, and you actually record it, to my knowledge in the United States, that's not a crime. However, playing it back is. And broadcasting it is definitely an offense. So if you go and pick up some kind of, like, frisky encounters of the third furry kind, and you record it, and you dump it to your computer, and you put it on YouTube, yeah, expect to get in a little bit of trouble about that. But if you're just walking around and peeking into people's security cameras, albeit it could be morally incorrect, I'm not teaching you morals here. There's no patch of human stupidity if you don't realize that your wireless camera in your bedroom is broadcasting a signal to the entire neighborhood. That's your problem that you didn't realize that. And hopefully in this segment now you do. So, I've actually gone around my neighborhood and I've actually went into shops and stores, and I've actually showed the store owners that their camera, albeit was easy to hook up, that they don't realize that they're broadcasting the whereabouts of the shop owner and all the people in the store at all times wirelessly. They don't even turn off the camera, so when they close up the shop, you can use this to peek inside and see if anyone's in there to rob the place. Once they made that aware to the people, they went and got wired cameras, or paid me to wire up new cameras. So, a couple of times I was actually expected to get shot in the face, but, you've been warned. So, receiving, cool. What you see might not be cool, so keep it to yourself. I've actually picked up bathroom cams, hidden bedroom cameras, parents beating their children unmercifully, nannies not tending to infants appropriately. I don't mean molesting, it's just the kid was screaming his head off, probably hungry or something, and a nanny was just sitting there on YouTube or MySpace or something, I couldn't tell. So, piece it together. Let me know what you see, as long as it's legitimate.
G'day, I'm Big Bro, and I'm here at Linux Conference Australia with Andy Tanenbaum. Andy's the key developer of the operating system Minix. Minix was developed in 1987 and ultimately influenced the development of Linux. So first off, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Originally, I'm from New York City, but I'm now living in the Netherlands.
Okay. So why did you decide to come to Linux Conference Australia?
Oh, I was invited to be the keynote speaker.
Yep. So what's Minix?
Minix is an operating system that's gone through 3 generations, and the first one, and to some extent the second one, were designed for educational use to teach people about operating systems. Among other people that taught was Linux. But now it's designed to be a very reliable system. I've noticed, talking to many people, that what they most dislike about computers is that they crash sometimes, they don't work sometimes. They really don't care about lots of features. They just want it to work all the time, like their TV set and their stereo. And so we're trying to build an operating system which is extremely stable, which can repair itself, and which is just very high reliability.
So originally it was created for educational use. So what influenced you to create it for the educational use?
Interestingly enough, there's a connection with the University of New South Wales that John Lyons wrote a book about version 6 Unix, which is widely used for teaching. That AT&T, which then owned Unix, decided to forbid the book and forbid teaching about Unix. And so a lot of people who were teaching couldn't use it anymore. So I said, Jill, I'll go out and write my own version of Unix, and then I can write a book about it. So I went out and wrote my own version of Unix, which is Minix 1, and wrote a book about it. It was widely used in teaching, and thousands of people began to use it. Within 3 months, we had 40,000 people in the news group, which in those days was a lot, because it wasn't
Definitely.
Big internet. And so it was originally designed for teaching operating systems.
So is it still in development at all?
Yes, about 2 years ago we decided to change the system from educational focus to one of a focus of a real system with very high reliability as the goal. In particular, we've done a number of things that can make the system be able to repair itself on the fly. There's been a lot of studies of code, and the studies show that there's about varies 10 to 20 or 10 to 50 bugs per 1,000 lines of code in all kinds of software. That means a system with 3 million lines of code is going to have thousands of bugs. In fact, people have also done studies on Linux to show that the device drivers have 5 times as many bugs per line of code as any other part of the system. So that with 3 million lines of code, we're probably talking about 10,000 bugs in the Linux kernel. And they're not all fatal, of course, but that just, it's very hard to make a reliable system when you have 10,000 bugs in the kernel. So we're trying to build a system which is of much higher reliability than other systems.
So what are you doing with Minix to increase the reliability of the operating system compared to, say, Linux?
Main thing is we reduce the size of the kernel to about 4,000 lines of code. So we've moved everything out of the kernel that doesn't need to be there. The kernel has got inter-process communication, process scheduling, interrupt handling, a couple of other things, but not very much else. And so we've moved all the device drivers to separate user processes, and with all the servers, the file server and the process server, to user mode. So that basically the kernel is very, very small, just handles inter-process communication. And the disk driver and the terminal driver and the Ethernet driver, those are all separate user processes. And each one runs as a user process, and each one has only a limited amount of power. It can only do the things it has to do. For example, since they run in user mode, they can't get at the I.O. ports. They have to make a call to the kernel to do actual I.O. And if the disk driver tries to touch I.O. ports that don't belong to the disk, it'll get an error message back. It won't be accepted. If the printer driver tries to touch the audio ports, it won't be accepted. So each driver is limited to only those things that it needs to do to get its work done. This is called the principle of least authority. It greatly limits the damage that can happen if a bug turns up. There'll still be bugs, but if a driver fails, we can detect that and replace it on the fly. And if it's in the kernel and it fails, and a bad pointer just wipes the system out. And here it just wipes out one process. So it's much less fatal, and we can recover from that.
So it's using a microkernel. What is a microkernel, and why did you choose it as opposed to the monolithic kernel that's used in Linux?
Actually, it's the other way around. Minix came before Linux, okay? And Linux was later derived or based on Minix in some sense. The idea of a microkernel, which has been around now for 30 or 40 years, is to get bugs in the kernel are much more serious than bugs in user mode. Okay? A bug in LS or in Firefox will not bring down the operating system. A bug in the Linux disk driver will bring down the whole system. So you want to get as much code as you can out of the kernel, so the kernel is as small and reliable as possible. A kernel with 3 or 4 million lines of code is going to have thousands of errors in it. A kernel which is 4,000 lines of code might have 20 errors in it, and there's a chance you might find them in the course of time. And so the idea is for high reliability, you want to have as little code in the kernel as you can get away with, and have everything else run as separate processes in such a way that the process is a well-defined interface to the rest of the system, and in the event of a failure, that process, that component can be replaced without bringing the whole system down. So it's for high reliability is the reason.
So what license did you release Minix under?
The Berkeley license, BSD license.
So why are you using the BSD license as opposed to like the GPL and things that other people release their code under?
Well, some people use the BSD license, some people use Creative Commons license, there are hundreds of licenses. The BSD license gives you the maximum freedom. Do whatever you want with it, no restrictions, except you can't sue us. Other than that, there's no restrictions, so it gives you the most freedom.
Let's see. In the past, there's been conflicts between you and Linus.
I would dispute that, but there was one short exchange in 1992 about how to design a kernel, which lasted about a week, and that's the only dispute I've ever had with Linus.
And unfortunately, that's
still
out there.
It's got a lot of publicity, but we had an exchange of 5 or 6 email messages 15 years ago. But other than that, I've had no problem with Linus. I don't think he has any problem with me.
So what's your current relationship with him? Do you talk to him much as a developer, or?
No, he's doing his thing, I'm doing my thing, but we're not at odds or anything. When this guy Ken Brown wrote a book saying that he had stole Linux from Minix, and that people who use Linux were in danger of being sued by me for intellectual property infringement, I came to his defense and made a website defending him, basically saying, no, he wrote it on his own. And so on. If you type Ken Brown to Google, you'll find that whole discussion. So I defended him when he was accused of criminal activities. So I actually have nothing against him, and I don't think he has anything against me.
So I presume it's a little bit of people manipulating your words and stuff.
There was this one exchange, 15 years ago, but we probably much more in common than we have in differences.
You also administrate the website electoralvote.com. So as some people know, you do have some strong political views. Why did you create that website?
The original reason for creating the website was to register overseas voters. In the U.S., it's relatively easy to register the voters in Ohio. You go to some town, you go to 1 Main Street, knock on the door, see if there are any voters there, and you go to 2 Main Street, 3 Main Street, 4 Main Street, and you've got the 614 Main Street, you've registered all the voters on that street. You can't do that overseas. There's probably 7 million Americans living overseas. They're very hard to find. You can't register them, but they can all vote.